Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Tuesday, September 2022 Board of Education meeting. I would like to have everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice President Malloy, and I'd like to issue a special thank you to Principal on Special Assignment, Mr. Mark Fleming, who found a flag for us, which was much appreciated. And after we say the pledge, if we could have a moment of silence for the Mancini family. Melissa Mancini is a Patty Hill teacher, and her mother and her sister also are employed by the district. She lost her husband the other day, and so if we could keep the Mancini family in your thoughts and prayers, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seconded by Ms. Flores. Any additions, corrections, deletions to the agenda? I would just like to make a slight amendment under 7.02, that we could change July under budget transfers to June. And with that, all those in favor of the agenda is amended. That passes 8-0. Moving on to the limited income exemption update. Superintendent Brown.
Yep, I'm going to invite Romeo.
Good evening, everyone. It's not so much an update as it is just a revisit of basically what we looked at the last board meeting in order to hold a public meeting that is required if we're looking to go ahead and change the income thresholds to our current exemption policy. So as we know, New York State has basic income exemptions for qualifying residents. It is currently up to $50,000 that was recently passed. However, what we're working under is the assumption of the $29,000 maximum limit for a 50% reduction. There's also a sliding scale option that if you earn more than the $29,000 or the threshold determined by the board, you can get a sliding scale exemption from 45 to 20 to 5%, depending on the income levels that you wish to have. That's also allowable in the law. There are two income exemptions we're looking at. One is the limited income senior exemption, and the other is the limited income disability exemption. Both have requirements. For the limited senior, 65 years of age and meet certain income limitations. Same thing with the disability exemption. You've got to have documentation to support the disability and also meet certain income restrictions as well. The one note on the bottom of the screen is that if you have a child in that household that is attending a public school, you are not entitled to that exemption, even if you do qualify, because that is a disqualifier for you. This is just a graph of what our current exemptions look like. The blue line on the bottom is our current exemption thresholds. So the more you earn, the less the exemption that you receive. The top orange line is currently the town of Greece, which is higher than what our thresholds are, but are in generally the same pattern. And the green line in the middle is the proposed income thresholds that the board is looking at for approval this evening. Looking at it a little bit more detail, what you see here is in the first column, the Greece current maximum limit is $20,000 to receive a 50% exemption for either type. Up to, you can earn $28,400 and still get a 5% exemption. However, on the town of Greece side, you can go up to $29,000 and still get 50%, and you can go as high as $37,400 $400 and still get a 5%. The mid-range proposal that you have in front of you for this evening kind of splits that difference. So we go from $20,000 to $24,500 for the 50% exemption, and then sliding scale, we would go from $28,399 to $32,899, and you would still be entitled to a 5% exemption if you qualify for either one. Just a quick summary on the numbers. Currently, under Greece, our current exemption, our current thresholds provide for 985 folks, households that qualify for the senior exemption. The county qualifies 1,587 under their threshold. Our proposed mid-range would increase us from 985, we estimate would increase us from 985 households to 1,250. Same with the disability exemptions, we would see an increase of approximately 9 or 10. The assessed values are below each of them, so if we go from our current schedule, which now has $43.6 million worth of exemptions, we would go to $65.1 million worth of exemptions as an estimate. And all in all, what you're looking at the bottom is the current rate for this school year is $24.84. If we go with the proposed mid-range proposal, we would go to this year, had it been in place, we would go to $24.95, an increase of 11 cents, or about 0.45% would have been the addition to the tax rate for this year. Some items to consider. Primarily provides exemptions for limited or fixed income or low income households. It spreads, so the district itself, the levy will always remain the levy. Whatever the levy is established at, the district is always made whole. What this will do is shift that 11 cents from those who qualify for the exemption to those who do not qualify for the exemption. It just shifts the cost difference amongst everybody else who doesn't qualify. And again, the last bullet, we're not sure what the town and the county are going to do. Recently got moved up to $50,000. We'll take a look at that when they make their determination over the next several months, and then, revisit this with the board again in the future. So our options, quite simply, eliminate the exemption, which is really not an option. Leave the current exemption schedule in place the way it is, revisit it in 3 years, or change the current exemption to the proposed thresholds for the 23-24 school year or the 24-25 school year. The only caveat there is that we need to provide the town with about a year's notice before we do that. So if we were looking to implement this for 23-24, we would notify the town of Greece next month, and it would be applicable for the 23-24 school year tax bills. And again, you can see that on the next bullet, and then a public hearing is required, which is what we're doing this evening. Thank you.
Romeo. Thanks. All right, I'm going to call the limited income exemption public hearing to order. I have no one signed up. I'm going to take a motion to close the public income. Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Mrs. Farmer. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Clarification, is this a vote on the proposal itself?
Nope, that's later in the meeting. This is just on closing the public hearing. Are you? Okay. It passes 8-0. Okay. Moving on to staffing. Can I have somebody move the staffing to the table, please? Moved by Vice President Laura, seconded by Ms. Flores. Any comments, questions, concerns on staffing? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 8-0. Mr. Smalling.
Good evening. I'd like to introduce Rachel Hawkins as the new Assistant Director of Phoenix Academy and Alternative Learning. Rachel completed her undergraduate degree in education as well as her graduate degree in special education at Oswego State University. She then attended St. John Fisher College to complete her graduate degree in educational leadership. Prior to Greece Central, Rachel worked at Monroe One BOCES. She taught at Monroe One for 6 years and has been an assistant principal at Monroe One for the last 6, moving into her 7th year. Rachel truly enjoys supporting students in their journey toward high school completion. She is passionate about supporting students to find success and overcoming challenges. Rachel also enjoys collaborating to support students in finding success and feel welcomed in their environment. Rachel's looking forward to continuing to grow her skills in supporting students to find success in the areas of alternate programming and learning. She is also looking to continue her work in creating learning environments and programming that are reflective of diversity, equity, and inclusion. When not at work, Rachel loves spending time with her family. She has 3 young kids, ages 5, 3, and 7 months. As a family, they enjoy getting outside as much as possible, swimming, hiking, and so much more. Congratulations and welcome to Greece.
I'm going to have you come up, Rachel, for a picture with Superintendent Groutman and Assistant Superintendent Zaffitz. Welcome to Greece Central. And I want to apologize to you for making you wait at your interview.
Oh, right, yeah. Here, you come right in.
Moving on, 3.02, can I so move the tenure to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Flores, seconded by Mrs. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on tenure? Seeing none, all is in favor. Any opposed? That passes 8-0. Moving on to the non-unit rate sheet, can I so move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Bonnegorio. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. Any opposed? That passes 8-0. Moving on to the Teamsters Memorandum of Agreement, can I so move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Ms. Flores. Comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. Any opposed? That passes 8-0. Moving on to 4.01, opening of schools update, Superintendent Groutman.
Yeah, so it says oral information, and that's what I said, but I put a few slides together. So I'm going to actually go up to the podium to do this. I have to be at that one? It's up here. I'm new to this. It's up there. It's up on that one. Sorry about that. So we have had a great opening to school. You can see here, obviously, everybody in the room knows that our theme this year is around embracing joy. And what I wanted to do is just go through a couple of sort of high-level areas that I reflect on every year in terms of how we open school, and just to give you just a little bit of information. So the first area that I want to talk a little bit, we're going to be talking about schools and operations, transportation, athletics and extracurriculars, and then just overall learning. So you see down below the picture of people in their T-shirts. So we got a great deal of support and excitement around getting staff back in schools, which has been great, and they're really excited. In terms of schools and operations, there is a number of things that probably people have heard about. The biggest being the Yonder rollout. So there's some bullets on here, but each of the schools worked incredibly hard throughout the summer to bring teams together to ensure a smooth rollout for Yonder and the cell phone pouches. That started through the summer. Mr. Fleming and Dr. Zaffitz worked really hard along with Dr. Colicchio and the school principals to ensure that, but that is going well. So outside of some folks still not liking it, overall, what we're seeing is procedurally, we spent the first couple of days getting kids going through assemblies and class meetings to make sure everybody understood the expectations and how that would look in the schools. And then we got it implemented the first full week of school. You'll see some things on social media. I will say kids are getting to class on time. There was one photo that was taken, I think, on the second day at Arcadia, with kids going in and there being a line. I want to be real clear. Kids are in and getting to school on time. The ones that are late are usually getting dropped off late. So we have had a few delays with transportation, with late drop-offs. But by and large, the procedural piece around entering and leaving has gone really smoothly. We do have work, construction work, so I know our board is well aware of where we are with much of our construction, and some of the challenges we've had with supply chain and with labor shortage. So we do still have some work that's continuing at Odyssey, and some other smaller things at Long Ridge, the ELC, and Buckman Heights. But by and large, the buildings look beautiful, and like I shared before, our custodians have done an incredible job of working with the facilities and planning department and the folks that are in and out doing that construction work on B shift. They've been amazing. So the schools look great. Schools are already started with professional development. There's a lot of mandatory things that we get going very early on. So there's been safety. Steve's been around to all the buildings, meeting with safety teams and actually doing staff meetings around certain procedures, active shooter training, those kinds of things. But then schools have also started to really dig in to using their Tuesday time to get their staff learning and on the same page with their school improvement plans. You'll see food services up and running. We've had some questions this year. So this year in particular, you may have heard people wondering about free meals. So we're coming off of the pandemic, which everybody got free meals during the pandemic. That was done this year. And then what complicates things is some of our schools in Greece are eligible for community eligibility, which means free meals for everybody in that school, but not all are. So I put an explanation in your memo just so that if you do get questions around that, you can explain. But I've done that with families that email me or call just to try to make sure everybody understands. We're really trying to make sure people fill out the free and reduced form though, because we do think that we don't necessarily get all families filling that out, and that number matters in terms of our community eligibility status, and also making sure just that families are getting what they need. You'll see our custodial positions. We did work this summer in terms of recruitment and have filled all of those positions, which is huge, and making a big difference in terms of just the general upkeep in schools, as well as even having some subs. But we also have had increased need in terms of with the usage of our fields, we're finding that taking a toll on our employees. So without having 4 large fields, that was less to take care of and just sort of different needs. But those are things that we're working on right now in terms of right sizing and staffing and hours and those pieces. So that just gives you a sense of some of the major areas related to school operations. In terms of transportation, you'll see that's Craig Hill on the bus coming to opening day. They too, in transportation, did a recruitment event and were able to get some drivers from that. So we would say, and I say this really with caution, we're fully staffed. However, we know, and you know just from last year, that's a tenuous balance. We have 8 folks that are in driver training that are sort of in the works for us, but that takes a little bit of time. We're hoping that those work out and that we remain fully staffed. But it's still, in this case, I'll give an example, with call-ins on any given day, we're still having to tap into some of the office staff to drive. So even though we appear to be fully staffed, there's still strain on the department. So there's still some things we're working on, and with those 8 additional drivers, it should help. One of the big things that I have gotten a lot of feedback, and I know you as board members have probably heard this as well as the people in transportation, the deadline change in terms of that July 1 change really has impacted people. The hard part about that is that if we made exceptions, there was about 200 people that wanted that exception to be made in terms of us to be able to transport or create a stop. When we calculated and really looked at what it would take, it would require about 10 more drivers. So just to kind of put that in perspective, the reason we went to that change through a lot of study was so that we can build efficiency with bus stops and our drivers. So that has been tough, but I do also think that as the years go on, people will make sure, I think people will comply with the deadline. And then we could actually get the routes done for them. You'll see we've had higher than normal requests related to private parochial and charters. Those numbers are up a bit. And you'll see one of the things that is always a struggle, and having been an elementary principal, I don't want to say confusion, the challenge around getting hundreds of kids out to buses when we have maybe 20 to 25 buses showing up at a school, kids going on all different buses, little ones. So there was a few kids put on wrong buses, which happens every year, and I don't say that lightly because that is never good. But with radios and communication, we don't lose kids. Just sometimes there's confusion, and sometimes that's because of last-minute changes that a parent has made. Sometimes it's that the system hasn't caught up, but that's something that Dr. Payne and myself and Mr. Richardson debrief about every year, and actually have some recommendations for our principals going forward. And then you all know just the concerns related to parking at this building. So just wanted to make sure that people, obviously, we had some folks talk at our last meeting. We're working on that. That's, it sounds like a simple thing, parking, but when you really get into it, it's a fairly complicated issue. So I know Romeo and myself and a few others have been working around a plan to address that and bring folks together here at this building. So that's in the works. Sports, athletics, and extracurriculars are up and running. So we have, you can see the marching band picture there. Our marching band is once again absolutely incredible. So we have a home show that's going to be coming up. I hope people make a priority to get there because they're really amazing. But the teams have also done a really great job. So many of our teams are finding success. One of the things that the ADs have talked to me about is the importance of the team meetings that they're having. The TOSAs and the athletic directors are meeting, talking about expectations around spectator behavior. And so far, discipline issues are down. Teams seem happy and doing well. And some of our programs are new and young, but they're working hard. You see we have a new strength and conditioning program, next level performance that we're using with our teams. And then we've also made adjustments specifically with teams where we've needed to either combine or add teams. So I say that because if there's enough interest, we will add teams. If there's not enough interest, so like Odyssey had an example with modified soccer with only 6 girls. So we've been able to combine them with a different team. So some of those things, that's a nice thing about a large district. In many places, kids would just not get that opportunity. Here, generally, we can be creative, I guess, and find ways to get students those experiences. And then you can see band, chorus, orchestra, musicals are like the schools and the music directors are just finalizing their picks for the year. So we'll start to hear more about that, but there's a lot going on. And a lot of happy kids engaged, which is nice. I couldn't stand this picture. I met her on the second day of school. But this was at our early learning center. So kids are in. We have about 130 new teachers. So I say that because there's been a ton of effort that's gone into supporting new teachers, because anybody coming in, we want to make sure are clear around how we do things operationally, but also what are we about from a learning perspective, and how do we make sure that they have the resources, the materials, and just that network and support that they need. So there's been a ton of work that's gone into really just supporting that. Our focus this year, the culturally responsive sustaining framework from the state, as you know, was released a couple years ago now. We are really taking on the pillar of rigorous instruction as our focus for this year. And really, how do we raise the bar to ensure that kids are getting really good instruction, but also instruction that's keeping them really in that zone of proximal development. So that's a high priority for us. And it's nice to see that at staff meetings and some of that PD, that's being talked about. So we're excited about that. We have professional learning communities that are up and running. We have more support in terms of things like language development, teachers and our social workers, things like that, that we're really happy because the schools are very supported. And in turn, the students are very supported. And that's it. Those are sort of my 4 key areas, but overall, as I said I was at a conference this past weekend, the whole vibe and feel of school feels differently this year. So to start last year, after the full year of COVID, and then having kids come back masked, just didn't feel the same. And I also think the impact of COVID was felt really significantly right as kids returned last year. This year, I will say, and this is my perspective having been everywhere, but at all the schools, is a much lighter feel. Seeing the smile, seeing kids back. We've had much less discipline than if you compare last year or the year before, or not really the year before with COVID, but in previous years. So it's been good. That's all.
Thank you, Superintendent Krautman. As long as you're there, I'm going to call on you to introduce our next presentation, the recruitment, hiring, and retention.
Yes, so I'm going to have Jeremy come up and do this presentation. This is a significant undertaking and body of work that Jeremy has been working on with his department. So we're really excited to share. It's a key part to that we talk about a lot with recruitment. You hear about it related to some of these departments and needs. And the work that Jeremy's doing with his team is impressive. So I'll let him come up and talk about it.
Aren't you supposed to be over here?
I thought so.
Did it?
Yeah. Yeah, HR is this side, and finance, instructions this side. There's rules.
It's not on though.
Oh, CIR, oh. No, you were making points, Jeremy. There, you're going down quick.
Change is good. Joe told me this time. I listened to Joe.
Okay.
Pardon?
All right, well, good evening. Jean and I are very excited to share some of the work our department has been focusing on in the area of staff retention and recruitment. So one of our goals or focus areas for this year for our department is focusing on recruiting, hiring, and retention. What we have learned and going through this, especially in the wake of the pandemic, is that you really do need to be data-driven and very targeted when it comes to looking at strategies to best recruit and then to retain our employees. I think what's different, if you go back a few years, really when it came to recruiting, you could put a posting up on your website, you could put it in the newspaper, possibly maybe a couple tweets, and people just came to you. We feel that that time has dramatically changed. We've also learned that recruiting and retention go hand in hand with one another. To effectively recruit, you have to have a culture and systems within your district that attract the best candidates that are out there. And if you do have those systems in place and the culture within your district, you then have to be targeted with your outreach to recruit, because we know what the job market's like and everybody is looking to recruit the best out there. So you do have to be very targeted, data-driven when you're looking to do both of those. So here's some celebrations. Since this data is from July 1 through just last week. So we have 193 new hires to Greece since July 1. And when I say new hires, these are new people to Greece. That does not include some current employees that have moved into different positions or promotions. but 193 new hires to our district. That's up about, I think, 85 from last year during that same time frame. I think we're at about 105. So we've seen that much of an increase in just 1 year. Some of the attributes that we put to getting 193 new candidates in, I think our contracts made a big difference. We are competitive now in all of our areas. When you're looking at these vacancies, we now compete and actually do much better than some of the other surrounding districts. So that has made a difference. I would also say that candidates want to come to Greece. That is consistent feedback that we hear in the interview process. And that's either when we're making a job offer, and I will actually say when we're calling back candidates that maybe weren't the recommended candidate, when we're giving that feedback following our interviews, we continually hear that they are, what other opportunities are there, or what more can they do to come and be a part of Greece. So that is some of the soft data that we are continually hearing throughout this interview process. There are some areas in need, though. Right now, we are looking for teaching assistants, childcare associates, special education monitors. Those are positions that continually be very difficult to fill. We have looked into some different incentives for our candidates to come and work with our population of special education students. I will say that one of the reasons that we've seen is these are positions where we see a lot of career ladders. So you see child care associates move into teaching assistants, which now creates a vacancy in child care associates. We see teaching assistants that are becoming certified and are now moving into GTA, which obviously make more vacancies in the area for teaching assistants.
So as Jeremy mentioned, we did settle all of our contracts last year, so we were very excited about being able to offer some higher wages, but we just weren't getting the traffic on our website and the applicants that we hoped for. So with the leadership of Kurt Keller in the facilities and operations and Dave Richardson in transportation, we offered 2 recruitment events this summer. We offered evening hours in hopes of increasing access for our community members, because that was some of the feedback that we got. And we had staff on site to help with not only filling out the applications, but to answer any questions about our contracts and benefits that we offer. It was really a great success, not only the evening of the event, but in the follow-up, the word of mouth and the additional applicants that we got since the events occur. And if you've run into Kurt since then, I think he's still smiling. And I think the updated information that we got just today is that he was able to hire 30 people from the event and from what occurred after. So again, that was a huge success. As Jeremy mentioned, we still do have the high needs area of special education. That includes special education teachers, teaching assistants, child care associates, and special education monitors. So we are planning another event to kind of follow in the footsteps of these 2 successful events. That's going to take place on Thursday, October 6th. From 4 to 6:30. It will happen right in this room. And again, we're going to be partnering because the Office of the Department of Human Resources can't do it alone. We're going to be partnering with the Department of Special Education as well as some of our building leaders to be here on hand and hopefully welcome some new candidates to fill those positions. So those were some of our celebrations. So we want to talk a little bit about our focus. So as you know, our new strategic plan outlines a number of strategies to help us actualize each of the commitments. You'll see in Commitment 2, Cultivate Trust, there's a strategy dedicated to the work of our department. Attract, develop, and retain a highly qualified, culturally responsive workforce that reflects and appreciates the diversity of the community and is committed to practices that are responsive to the needs of all students and families. Within Superintendent Groutman's goals, an even more narrowed focus is called out to help create accountability for working on our strategy. So Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about how this committee has already started to come together. We're pretty excited.
So we're currently calling it Recruiting and Retention Committee. We will work on a better name for that, but right now that's where it stands. I wanted to call out our members that are part of this. So as you saw in Superintendent Groutman's goals, it talks about just a variety of stakeholders to be a part of this. So we do have 2 of our members, so 3 of our members here this evening. Sarah Titus, who's a TOSA, who's here this evening. Mark Fleming, our principal on special assignment, and Cedric as well here just to hear a little bit about our presentation. But this committee, what's great, one of the strengths of this committee is just the very unique perspectives that are helping us take a look at some of our current practices and then looking at some new and innovative ways that we can recruit and retain. So them not being a part of human resources actually allows some questions, some systems that have been in place for a while that maybe need to be changed or tweaked. So their perspective has been great in just the few meetings that we've had, and we're looking forward to our future meetings coming up shortly. So the charge of this committee, there's a lot of work that we're looking at, but there's some key areas that we wanted to take a deeper dive into. And one of them was looking at we're going to focus on GTA because there's a lot of areas that we could focus on, and we figured we start with our teaching association. And one of the key areas that we're going to look at is just screening. We call it screening in candidates. So if you're familiar with the hiring process, you have to use a platform is called Frontline, and people apply. And what typically happens, or we hear a lot from some feedback, is their application goes in, and unless they actually reach out to one of us or somebody refers them, it sits in that database until somebody actually calls them in for an interview. We feel that if we can proactively screen candidates in, number one, that turnaround time, and we also feel that we lose candidates as they sit and wait and then other jobs come up. So through a screening process, a short 15-minute interview face-to-face where we can screen candidates and vet candidates and then now have a pool of preferred candidates to hire, our hiring managers could go directly to a database, identify candidates for their building, and then come off of that versus going through Frontline. So that will be a big effort. It's going to take a lot of manpower, but we feel confident that's something that we're going to be able to do. Additionally, we wanted to look at a way to develop a system for a referral process for potential candidates, possibly coming from our community members. We have several partnerships that you're aware of, people that work indirectly within our district that know people that are out there that could be a good fit for our district. So developing a simple process that will allow somebody to recommend a name with just a little bit of information that then will allow us to make that phone call and have contact with somebody to get an idea of what are you looking for? Do you want to work in a building? Are you looking to work with students? Are you looking to work with facility operations or transportation? But a simple, easy system to allow people to be recommended, especially from the outside community, which will also be an opportunity for people within our system to make recommendations as well. Parent involvement in training. We are very focused on having parents be a part of our interview process. But to do that, we feel that there's a lot of learning that they need to understand with looking at hiring bias and looking at the system or the process that we use to interview. We've gone to behavior-based interviews, and that takes a little bit of learning. So we wanted to develop a way to bring parents and give them some training about this process so that they could be readily available to sit on different interview committees as needed sometimes when we do struggle to have a parent show up. Sometimes it's simply scheduling that's difficult for that. So our first goal, our immediate goal, is to give them training within our interview process, but we're also hoping is a way to build some more recruiting and ways to get the word out of our vacancies by using some of our parents that want to be a part of this process. So we're excited about that. The other area of focus for our committee is just to really take a deeper dive into our current systems that are in place now. Taking a deeper dive into our hiring process, getting some other perspectives on what are we doing well, what can we improve on. Job postings. Typically, job postings are just repeated from year to year, but we know that we could do a better job revising them to really highlight the work that's going on in the district. So we're going to look at job postings that will attract the best candidates that are out there. We also want to take a deeper dive into looking at our employee demographics and then getting out and getting some feedback from candidates that are new to our district or have been here for a number of years of what are we doing well? Why did you stay? What brought you here? What has kept you here? And then starting so we could get in front of some of that turnover before it happens. And then in addition to that, trying to, for our candidates that do leave, how can we get some exit interview information to know what we could do better on? We know that exit interviews are difficult. A lot of people don't want to meet with HR. they don't want to meet with their supervisor. But if we could have possibly teachers, Cedric was looking at doing some of that work, or even some parents possibly to gather some of that information, we feel that that would be extremely valuable for us. Another area of focus is trying to get a better, do a better job of monitoring staff retention. I talked about this a year ago, and we're hoping to do more work going into this year now with the work of the committee. But trying to have a better understanding or differentiate between the different types of turnover. We did some research, and there is a different types of turnover that the next slide will identify. But how can we get out and understand if people leave, why are they leaving? Again, what could we do better, and how could we get in front of some of the turnover that we have seen over the past couple of years? This slide shows the different types of turnover. So when you look at turnover, really what this breaks it down into is there's voluntary turnover, and there's involuntary turnover. And when you look at involuntary turnover, that's usually layoffs, reductions, possibly terminations. And then underneath voluntary and involuntary, there's functional and there's dysfunctional turnover. So when you look at voluntary, those are people that are resigning or they're retiring. But then when you look a layer down from voluntary turnover, you have functional and dysfunctional. Not all turnover is bad. So if we are losing somebody that is effective staff member, we see that as dysfunctional turnover. We want to know what led to that turnover. Why did you leave? When it's functional, sometimes that's losing our less effective staff. But what we really want to do is look at that highlighted area of avoidable voluntary turnover. If they're here, why are we losing them? And that's where we want to spend some of our time gathering that data so we can make those adjustments either within the building or across the district to offer the right supports for our staff once we do all that work to attract them here to the district.
So Jeremy used the word data quite a bit, and we are constantly looking for ways to be able to collect more data from our employees. We're fortunate to have Julie Riley, our Assistant Director of Human Resources, on our team because she's constantly on the lookout for new and interesting ways to gather and track data. Energage is one great example of an opportunity that Julie found for us, and we're really excited about it. So Energage is the company that hosts the surveys that allow organizations to compete for the top workplace awards that you've probably seen posted on billboards and in magazines and online. We are excited that we're going to be partnering with Energage not only to compete for a top workplace award, but also to have the opportunity to gather this type of data from our employees. So we are going to be sending out the Energage survey to our employees next week, Wednesday, September 28th, and that'll be open for 2 weeks. The survey is completely confidential, and it will go to all of our employees, so all 3,000 employees. We're hoping that the benchmark data that we get from this survey will help us to learn from our employees, what is it that you really love about Greece? Again, to Jeremy's point, what keeps you here? Like, what are the great things? And as well as what things could we be doing better? We'll also have the ability in the future, you can see the pulse surveys. We can send out mini surveys that are either aligned to the benchmark data that we collect, so kind of as a check-in, just maybe 1 or 2 questions that align, or we can choose something completely different, just as a, hey, we're thinking about this new initiative, what do you think? And send those out. It also gives us an opportunity to do some branding that we can use social media, on our website, on our job postings, and an ability to get some mini awards. I want to give you some visuals for that. So here are some of their ideas for branding. So you can see in the middle, those are words that have come directly from either the Pulse survey or the original survey. And if you've ever seen these type of wordles, the larger words are the words that come up more often. The smaller ones are the words that don't exist as often. So we could take that entire thing, splash it up on our website or in social media. Over on the right, we've got those are some direct quotes that came from employees. And over on the left, that's something that we could put together again on a job posting. So those are just some of the examples that we could use. So we're really excited about that. We're working with our unions to help us push this out as well. So we're hoping for a large enough response rate from our employees to be able to qualify for that award. So proactive hiring and recruiting is just another example of some creative marketing that we're working on. So this is a job board that links directly to our current frontline system. And by partnering with them, we're able to be seen by prospective employees that may not have gone directly to our website. So this is a job board that is for K-12 positions, and it has over 1.4 million active users. So this is folks that might be outside of Monroe County, they might even be outside of the state and looking to relocate. So they go and they look for a job. All of our jobs are linked to it. So when they click on a job, it brings them right to our website. So this is just another way to get them to come to our site. Maybe they've never even heard of Greece, but it gets them to our site and investigating around. So hopefully that will bring even more folks right to us. And last, this is something that we're very excited about. So Frontline is the system that we're currently using for absence management, professional growth, and recruiting and hiring. Frontline Central is the product that electronically ties all of these systems together. So one of our goals in the Department of Human Resources, which is tied back to an audit that was completed a couple of years ago by Gallagher, is to really streamline our systems and processes for not only our department, but for our employees. So Frontline Central really helps us shorten the time frame from the time an employee applies for a position to the time that they start. So we're really, really excited about what this brings to the table. Our department just started sending out our first electronic in-processing, which you guys don't seem as excited as I am, but it really is a very big deal, because normally it's a packet that's about 50 pages long that we either have to leave down at door 5 for somebody to pick up, or we put in the mail. And people get it 4 or 5 days later, and then they bring it to their in-processing packet. So now they're gonna get it instantly, they fill it all out, and for the employee on their side, every page already has half of it pre-filled out. So they're not writing their name 15 times, they're not writing their address 15 times. So it is actually very exciting. So we're also excited about adding additional forms. As you can see, the confidentiality statement, the ID badge request, we've got some benefits forms that we're gonna be adding, and those are gonna be coming soon. So those are some of the things that we're excited about working on in the area of recruitment and retention, and I think that's it for now.
Questions?
Any questions?
Questions? Ms. Farmer?
Thank you. That's awesome. Love it. One question, and I don't know how this would even work. So out-of-state.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Out-of-state workers, oh, this isn't plugged in. So Greece shows up, is there anything within that, that kind of talks about our area and what kinds of things they could expect in Monroe County, Greece, that whole thing? Do we have anything like that that might pull somebody in without them having to say, oh, let me check out what Greece, New York's, so go another place?
It's funny you asked that. Dave Blowitz, he's on the committee, the Recruiting and Retention Committee. That is an area that is a high interest of him, that he is actually working. He's going to, currently he's working with one of the real estate companies locally to see what they've already put together.
Cool.
But we do want to advertise just the area. So when you're looking at Rochester, highlighting restaurants, social events, things that are nearby as a way to attract people in. We could customize that landing page for the proactive recruiting to some degree, but not to the depth I think that you're looking at. So that is one of the areas that we're already dipping into right now for recruiting.
Any other questions? Mr. Bonnegorio?
The survey is really interesting. I know there's been a lot of interest in trying to, for staff, providing feedback. I'm wondering if the survey questions will even tap staff for what kinds of things they'd like to reflect. So, you can set up a bunch of questions that they'll respond to, but are we looking to them for what those will include?
So there's two. So there's the top workplace that is standardized, that goes out and asks. We could give samples of that, but that is standardized. What's really nice, I think that what you're referring to is the pulse surveys. So the pulse surveys allow us to customize. It's broken down by unit, so we could look at transportation unit or our teachers unit. So we could, it doesn't have to go to all 3,000 employees. Those questions could be customized Anyway, we like to get that perception data that we're looking for to get a better understanding of what are we doing well and what could be some of those areas of focus. So that can be customized.
Sure.
So those pulse surveys, are those already in place, or?
No, so typically what happens is that window that Gina mentioned for the top workplace. And then when that's done, they kind of give us some guidelines of when you would start looking at the pulse surveys. One thing that we want to keep in mind are the amount of surveys that already go out to staff. We know that we survey quite a few in the buildings. We haven't really reached out to some of the other unions or employees that are, for example, Teamsters comes to mind. I don't know how often we've reached out to them through the surveys, but we do have to be mindful of that so that we're getting, people are responding and it's valuable feedback. Thank you.
Dr. Haywood?
Two things. One is a comment. Two things. One's a comment and one's a question. The first thing is in response to what Tracy mentioned in terms of whether or not you will have information about what the area offers. One suggestion that I have is as you're building that out, maybe linking with our local Chamber of Commerce page. They do a really good job of identifying what exactly we have here in Greece. That might be attractive, so that's just an idea. Number two, which is a question, may I? Sure. Thank you. With the TA, teacher assistant, child care associate, and special education monitor event that you're putting on, I just wondered for anyone that might be listening, are there special credentials that you need for those particular positions, or are we looking more so for entry-level folks?
So there are special credentials for each of those, but we invite all community members who are interested in working with students to come in, and we will have lots of people on hand to talk through what their qualifications are, and then we can make suggestions for what they're already qualified for, as well as, you know, what would be needed to move up to the next level. So.
Any other questions? Mrs. Farrar?
I love this, thank you. I specifically love the parent involvement in the training. I can't wait to see that. I hope you'll keep us informed more with this. We got to the screening process, so that is great. Our board members, can we see a copy of the surveys? Is there too many questions to, I'm just
Yeah.
curious as to see what they are and what the detail that you get back. That would be great.
Yeah, it's all confidential.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Vice President Moore?
When you talked about training parents, how do you go about finding parents to be on interviews? Do you have a process?
Sure. So last year, we started by working with Luva Alvarez, who I'm sure you're all familiar with, through PLTI. And she reached out, started by reaching out to a group of parents who were just interested in volunteering. So we started by reaching out to those parents and said, hey, we're going to be doing some administrator interviews. Are you interested in coming in? So we had a bank of probably 8 to 10 parents who came in and joined us for administrative interviews. And they came in, they joined our teams, we walked them through the same training that we had for our teachers and other administrators. And then Cedric and I did a debrief with a number of the parents afterwards, and it was wonderful, and a ton of really rich information came out of it. One being, hey, you all speak a different language than we do, because you speak educator speak, and we speak normal person speak. So what came out of it is that we would be able to reach a lot more parents if we did some front loading of this is what the process is, and really preparing them for coming in so that they would feel more comfortable and really feel a part of the team as they came in. So we're going to invite that same group of parents and kind of bring a friend, as well as reach out to all of our parent engagement coordinators and invite them as well as any other parent that's interested.
Thanks. Any other questions? Mr. Bonagario?
Just to follow up on that a little bit, I would ask this question of any of our committees, but maybe just yours specifically. Is there any ability to schedule things so that more types of parents can be involved? I know a lot of people can't make daytime things because of work. People, you know, in the evening is also hard, but is there a way to juggle that to get more representation in it.
For sure. So there's actually two goals that we kind of have to go along with that. One is to schedule this training either in the evening or on the weekend. And we also talked about having some childcare there. We have a lot of students who are looking for community service hours, so that would be one thing. And then also hopefully getting to a point where we could even have some of our interviews in the evening hours, and we would be able to send out a schedule ahead of time to parents to say, you know, these are the hours that the interviews are going to be, who would be available during those times. So it's really about being proactive in our planning and not, you know, hey, we have an interview tomorrow, who's free? So a couple things to work on. Sure.
Mrs. Farmer? Microphone?
PT essay, is that what, so those are in the evening, correct? The meetings with PTA
Yeah.
at schools?
Yep.
Okay, so parents always have the opportunity to attend those in the evening, so it's not quite as in-depth as I understand you to be talking about, if you want to focus on one specific, but it's a great start, and you can begin to gather, and, you know, whatever it is that needs to be talked about if a parent wants to come in. So I'm thinking, just wanting to say that there are other times in the day where people can participate if they want to. And starting at the school is a great spot where your kids go.
Any other questions? Thank you both.
Thank you.
Moving on, item 5.01, additional funding of the Workers' Compensation Reserve Fund. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Dr. Trawick, seconded by Mrs. Flores. Any comments, questions, or concerns on that? Seeing all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes 8-0. Moving on to the limited income exemption approval. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Mrs. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Mr. Bonnegorio.
For public understanding of it, Mr. Clilley, can you maybe just a thumbnail sketch of the impact of, or not, of rising property appraisals on the tax levy, which would be impacted in the
Question you had earlier.
yes.
Okay, sure. So Mr. Bernigario's question was regarding do the assessed values that we receive from the town of Greece provide us with additional revenues during a year as a result of the house values increasing from one year to the next? The answer to that question is it does not provide us any additional revenues because the homes went up. The levy is set through the tax cap formula. The levy is set in February or March. So we go through that 8-9 variable calculation, and I'll use this year as an example. And we come up with a levy in March that we get approval from the board, because we're going to submit it March 1st. We cover it with you in February, that the levy is going to be $120 million. When we get the assessed values in July from the town of Greece, whether those assessed values went up $100 million or $500 million, we are still only going to collect $120 million from residents for the property tax revenue. Where the assessed values comes in is the levy of $120 million is then divided by the assessed value from the town of Greece, and providing that everything else is held steady, if the assessed values go up and the levy stays at 120, then the tax rate will come down. And if the assessed values were for some reason to decrease, we'd still be taking that 120, dividing by a smaller number, and therefore the levy would change as well. So the assessed values have nothing to do with calculating the levy. The assessed values help us calculate the rate at which taxpayers will pay per $1,000 of assessed value on their home. Does that help?
Let me see if anybody else has a question. Anybody else have any questions? Nope, go ahead.
So, yeah, thank you for that. I think I had the misunderstanding that the general rise in property values would directly impact that revenue. So, yeah, thank you.
Not not as directly as since the tax cap came out 12 years ago.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Mr. Bonagario?
Okay. And just also to clarify that the exemptions that would be offered to certain residents, that those revenues would have to be made up by shifting the tax burden to those who don't get the exemptions.
It would be spread out amongst the other folks other residents in the district that do not qualify for the limited income senior or disability exemption, correct?
Any other questions? Mr. Bonagario?
Is there any test on property values that's associated with the exemption? There are income tests, low income levels that provide the exemptions, and there are disability tests, but are there any tests on property values? For example, someone has a lot of assets, little income, but a $500,000 home, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no. It's strictly based on the assessed value of the home per the town of Greece.
And the qualifications based on the income?
Correct. It's strictly, do you meet the income levels, and for the disability documentation requirements.
Any other questions? Mr. Bonagario?
So is there any ability to factor that in so that homeowners who have low income and not an extravagant, I'll use that term, property would be the ones who could be benefiting most? Is there any ability to do that?
Not from our end, no. That
Did it violate the real
is
property tax law?
That is property tax law, and it's processed all through the town of Greece. We have no impact, input, or anything to do with that. That is just provided to us through their final rolls. Here are all the people that qualified for each of the exemptions that are, numerous exemptions, that are authorized by New York State.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Good. All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes 7-1. Moving on to the consent agenda. Now, Sonia, move that to the table, please. Moved by Vice President Laura, seconded by Mrs. Flores, sorry. Any questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That passes 8-0. Moving on to the student trip approval. Can I, Sonia, move that to the table, please? Moved by Mrs. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this? Mr. Bonagario?
Yeah, I know there are some changes going on in some neighboring districts. I'm just curious about any policies that we have regarding housing of students, in rooms on overnight trips. This is the one, is it? Yeah,
Yeah, this is the marching
yeah,
band trip.
right.
So I want to make sure I understand your question.
So someone identifies one gender or another, is there a biological, we go by biological sex, assigning students to rooms, or is that a consideration? I've heard of that being an issue in
We don't have anything
neighboring
written in
districts.
policy. I mean, that talks about,
They're extremely individualistic.
They're extremely individualistic situations, and each are handled as such.
Can you elaborate on that at all?
again, each situation is different. I can't say if this, then this.
Okay.
Dr. Traywick?
So I'm a marching band parent. I can elaborate just a little.
Microphone, please.
Oh, yeah. As a marching band parent, my kids have been in the band for now 5 years. That has not come up. However, you do have the opportunity, all the students have the opportunity to ask for specific assignments. They choose where they want a room, and you can also opt to have a room by yourself if you choose to. So I do know those things. But I know that that particular issue has not come up as of yet, so.
Yeah, so that, I guess the bigger piece is there is no language in the policy around, so there's a lot of, if you want to see the policy, we can go on in terms of student trips. That's more of like a procedural in terms of, and there's only a few trips where they're overnight. So typically, we've worked directly, and most follow, Dr. Traywick, what you just shared in terms of, like the 8th grade trip, for example. There's specifics around who wants to room with who and those pieces. Trying to accommodate.
Any other questions? I'm just going to say, it's been a long time since we've had a school trip, so this is pretty awesome to see. Going back to 2020, so with that, all those in favor? Any opposed? Passes 8-0. Moving on to 9.01, superintendent goals. Can I somebody move those to the table, please? Moved by Vice President Millar, second by Ms. Flores. Any comments, questions, or concerns on those? Seeing none, Mr. Bonnegorio, sorry.
Thanks, and I understand these goals were developed in the last term. Is that? It's
No,
not.
that's
These are
just
not.
for this year. This is board.
For this term, but were they submitted previously? Or
Nope.
this is our first look at them?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'm just wondering, I see there are some easy measurables in there, which are great. We like that kind of thing. I'm wondering if, do we have, I didn't notice it in there, but anything that specifically targets things like the national assessment for education progress scores? I think there was some language about meeting expectations, but I'm not sure what that means. Is that pertinent to state or national standards or our own goals? Just a little.
I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of that. What I would say, one of the things that I had provided the board at retreat was there was almost a chart that goes through really specifically, they match up with the strategies and goals, particularly with the strategic plan and then my goals, because they're all aligned. And then there's like measurable progress over to the side in the column, which I could resend. But that has like really specific things connected to each of the goal areas. That would be what I would want to be looking for, or I'd want you to be looking for in terms of like evaluating.
Any other questions or comments?
Ranges from state to-
Any other questions or comments? I'm just going to say my one comment with the board superintendent goals is that I love the continued tie-in to the community, to our community partners. There's so many that tie into our community partners, which I think are awesome, continuing to build those relationships and work those relationships. With that, all those in favor? Any opposed? Item carries 8-0. Mr. Maloney, your turn to shine.
I'd like to ask to have this meeting adjourned.
I gave it as a
Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded. Mrs. Farmer, all those in favor? I'm not going to ask if there's any opposed. That passes 8-0. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.